Why I love being single. The soft hum of chatter, the clink of spoons against porcelain mugs, and the faint scent of coffee beans roasted to perfection filled the air of the small cafe tucked into a quiet corner of the city. I sat by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. My journal lay open in front of me, pen in hand, but I hadn't written a single word. People walked by, umbrellas bobbing like colorful mushrooms. Couples passed, hands clasped tightly, some laughing, some simply walking in silence. I used to think scenes like this would make me feel lonely. They used to, but not today. There's something oddly comforting about being alone in a place like this. You realize how much of life you've missed while trying to fit into someone else's narrative. I took a sip of my cappuccino and finally wrote the words that had been echoing in my mind. Why I love being single. People often look at single women like they're unfinished stories, waiting for the love interest to appear before the happy ending can be written. As if we're side characters in our own lives until someone chooses us. But what if I told you the best part of my life started the moment I chose myself? I wasn't always like this. There was a time I believed love meant sacrifice, giving up pieces of yourself to complete someone else. I used to think being single was something you endured, like a waiting room before real life began. Until someone came into my life who taught me a very different lesson. The love that broke me, his name was Marco. He had the kind of smile that made you forget why you were upset, and eyes that looked like they could see right through you. We met at a friend's birthday party, both reaching for the last slice of pizza. It was cliché, I know, but it felt magical then. The first few months were a dream. Flowers for no reason, long drives with no destination, lazy Sundays spent wrapped in each other's arms. I fell fast, deep, and hard. He made me feel like the only girl in the world. But slowly, the charm turned into something else. He started questioning my clothes, my friends, even my career choices. Why do you have to work so late? He'd ask, or do you really need to go out with them again? It started with subtle control, masked as concern. I thought it was love. I convinced myself he just cared too much. I began to shrink myself to keep him happy. I stopped going out, laughed less, stopped painting something I used to love. I didn't even notice the pieces of myself slipping away. Then came the jealousy. He'd get upset if I didn't answer his calls immediately, accuse me of being too friendly with male colleagues. I spent more time apologizing than smiling. Still, I stayed. Because I believed love was meant to be hard, that if I just tried harder, he'd change. The breaking point came on a cold December night. We had a massive fight over a message from a childhood friend. He threw my phone across the room. In that moment, I saw a stranger in the man I once adored. I left in tears, shaking, with nothing but my purse and a breaking heart. For weeks, I cried myself to sleep. I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe if I had just loved him better. The silence in my apartment was unbearable. But what I didn't realize then was that the silence would later become my sanctuary. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, staring at the girl who looked nothing like the version of myself I used to love. My eyes were dull, my smile forced. And that's when I knew I had to choose me this time. The first days were the hardest. I kept reaching for my phone to call him, to fix things, to hear his voice. But I stopped myself. I knew if I went back, I'd lose myself completely. I stayed in bed for days, ignoring texts from friends, skipping meals. My sister, Anna, finally came over and dragged me out to a park one sunny afternoon. We sat on a bench, watching kids run and laugh. "You lost him, yes," she said, "but you found yourself. And that's worth everything." Those words clung to me like a life raft. I started doing small things again, cleaning my room, cooking a decent meal, replying to messages. One day, I picked up my old paintbrush and cried when I realized how much I missed it. I began reading again, books I had abandoned during the relationship. Stories about brave women, journeys of healing, and characters who reminded me of myself. I wrote letters to myself in my journal, pouring out the grief and guilt, slowly replacing them with forgiveness and compassion. I was relearning how to live alone. The silence that once haunted me started to feel like peace. My apartment no longer echoed with sadness. It became a place of growth. I put up new art on the walls, rearranged the furniture, and bought fresh plants. Slowly, it started to feel like home. Months passed. I began to feel lighter. I signed up for a dance class on a whim, terrified but excited. I went on a solo weekend trip to a nearby town, walking through markets, trying food I couldn't even pronounce. I sat in a park and painted a watercolor of the sunrise. I said yes to invitations I would have declined before. I made new friends, people who saw me, not who I was trying to be for someone else. I laughed more, louder than I had in years. The best part? I started making decisions just for me. I got a promotion because I wasn't afraid to work late or speak up anymore. I rearranged my apartment. I wore red lipstick again. I attended a women's empowerment seminar. There, I met other women with stories like mine. We cried together, shared stories, and cheered each other on. It was in one of those group sessions that I finally said the words, "I love being single." And I meant it. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter on weekends. The unconditional love from the animals was healing. I found joy in giving without expecting anything in return. I picked up photography, capturing moments of beauty I would have missed before. Raindrops on leaves, strangers laughing, a cat napping on a windowsill. I was falling in love with life, one small moment at a time. The moment of clarity, one evening, I went to the beach alone. I sat on the sand as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and gold. The wind tangled my hair, and the waves whispered secrets I was finally ready to hear. I wasn't sad. I wasn't longing. I was whole. I smiled to myself, tears stinging my eyes, not from pain, but from gratitude. I had made it. Through the heartbreak, the doubt, the darkness. I watched as a little girl built a sandcastle beside her dad. She laughed when the waves knocked it down, and immediately started rebuilding. That was me now. No longer mourning what I lost, but celebrating what I could create anew. That night, I walked home slowly, taking in every scent, sound, and color. The city felt alive in a way it never had before. And so did I. Weeks later, I bumped into Marco at a bookstore. He looked surprised, maybe even a little guilty. I smiled and nodded politely. "You look happy," he said. "I am," I replied. And I meant it. He asked if I wanted to catch up sometime. I declined gently. There was no anger, just clarity. Later that week, someone new asked me out. He was kind, interesting, and cute. I said I'd think about it. Not because I was scared, but because I was in no rush. I had everything I needed already. Back at the same cafe, I sat by the window again. This time, I wasn't trying to write a story. I was simply living one. I took a sip of coffee, flipped to a fresh page, and smiled. Why I love being single. Because in being alone, I finally found myself. Because solitude gave me space to grow, to create, to breathe. Because I no longer define my worth by who chooses me, but by who I choose to be. Being single doesn't mean being unloved. Sometimes, it means loving yourself enough to wait for what you truly deserve, or not wait at all. It means becoming the love of your own life. My name is Clara, and thank you for listening to my story.